Alô, pessoal, muito boa noite, sejam todos muito bem-vindos a mais um A Hora da China, live semanal que realizamos aqui com muito empenho e carinho para trazer toda semana, toda terça às 21 horas, tudo que acontece em termos de inovação, empreendedorismo, novas tecnologias, modelos de negócios, enfim, tudo que toca esses temas que tem acontecido na China e entendemos ser de extrema relevância compartilhar com todos aqui no Brasil. Então, para quem não me conhece, eu sou o Felipe Leal, sou sócio da StartSe, responsável pela operação da StartSe na China. Eu estou no Brasil por conta da pandemia, mas semanalmente aqui compartilhando essa live, esse programa, junto com o Win, com a Camila e com os nossos convidados e com todos vocês que nos dão a honra aí da presença, que é sempre muito legal de recebê-los. Estou vendo aqui o Gerson, que está sempre com a gente, a Gabriela também, já uma assídua conosco, o Everson, Zin também, sempre presente, o Anderson. Vão falando aí, pessoal, de onde vocês estão falando. Me passei aqui, mas o Gerson está em Lajeado, a Gabriela em Guarapari, no Espírito Santo, o Everson aqui na capital, em São Paulo, o Anderson também. Vamos ver quem mais está aqui, o André Barbosa, de Minas Gerais, Vitória, aqui o Ricardo. É isso aí, pessoal, muito bacana. Olha o Antônio aqui, nosso amigo, também saudades do curso New Retail Revolution, E-Commerce Revolution agora, Antônio, muito legal. Muito bom, pessoal. A Cíntia falando de Cataguases, em Minas Gerais. Muito bom, pessoal. Quem está na plataforma da StartSe, a gente está transmitindo essa live nos canais da StartSe no YouTube, no Facebook, no LinkedIn e também na plataforma da StartSe, app.startse.com. Entra lá na parte de eventos, uma aba de eventos que vai cair na live aqui. Eu estou vendo o Alexandre aqui dando o seu alô, então, direto de São Paulo. Então, muito bem-vindos, pessoal. Muito legal receber todos vocês. O Win está entrando já, então o Win vai se juntar a nós aqui. E antes de eu passar a fazer as apresentações e mudar a língua oficial da nossa conversa para inglês, porque hoje já antecipo, a live será em inglês. O nosso convidado está lá na China e vai falar com a gente em inglês hoje. Não vai ter tradução, então é um modelo que a gente faz aí com alguma frequência. Volta e meia a gente traz um convidado estrangeiro para falar e a gente faz a live em inglês. Então já estou avisando a todos aí. Espero que todos vocês possam continuar com a gente aí, mesmo a live sendo em inglês. Ok? Então eu vou dar boas-vindas aqui para a Camila, dar o seu boa noite em português e depois a gente introduz aqui o nosso convidado.
Boa noite, pessoal. Bom dia, Leal. Good morning for David as well, that is here in China with me. E eu quero dizer que o que a gente está fazendo hoje é de extrema importância, até porque no momento que eu vim morar aqui na China, uma das coisas que mais me chamou a atenção era como inovação se fazia de uma forma totalmente diferente de como a gente faz nos Estados Unidos, nos moldes da Europa, nos moldes do Brasil também. Então, por isso que a gente vai trazer hoje esse convidado mais do que especial para falar um pouquinho sobre esses modelos de inovação.
Perfeitamente. É isso aí. O tema da live de hoje é Open Innovation, inovação aberta. Uma temática que eu navego nela aqui dentro da StartSe já desde do meu início aqui na StartSe, quando lá em 2017 a gente criou a vertical corporativa aqui na StartSe e desde então a gente tem ajudado empresas também a se conectar com todo esse universo e o tema de inovação aberta, Open Innovation, é um tema central de tudo isso. Muito bem, vamos trazer o nosso convidado para a conversa então. David, welcome to the show. Thank you once again for accepting our invitation. It's a pleasure to have you here. Actually, Ian made the invitation for you, and so he will be joining us in a few minutes. Please, if you can present yourself from where you're talking. I thought you were talking about in Shenzhen, from Shenzhen, but actually you're in Shanghai. So welcome once again, and thank you for being with us.
To be here. So I have an office in Shenzhen, but my home is in Shanghai. So it's a little bit interesting setup. I guess My name is David Lee. I'm the Executive Director of Shenzhen Open Innovation Lab. We do research on looking at how innovation happen in China in this very innovation happen in China in this very bottom-up and grassroots style. It creating this very vivid, very engaging, collaborative ecosystem of innovation, which doesn't really fit into the narrative of the most Silicon Valley, very elite startup, venture capital driven system. And that's what builds Shenzhen. And that's actually what builds most of the innovation cluster here in China. So yeah, it's good to have a opportunity to talk about this. And I think this is even more interesting in the context of what's going on in China today. I think people coming in from outside looking at China has this talks about cracking down of the big tech, but it's not that. It's a wrong way to look at this because there's no cracking down on big tech. That's leveling the playing field in the tech sectors. There's a lot of tech players in China people probably never heard of. In e-commerce, people heard of Alibaba. Jack Ma is on the news headline everywhere. He has been used as this symbolic crackdown of big tech in China. But in fact, Alibaba even though Alibaba is the biggest e-commerce company here, it's not the only players. In terms, that's JD, that's Suning, that's Pinduoduo, that's huge host of other e-commerce players. Not all of them gets cracked down. Actually, some of them actually gets really benefit from cracking down of Alibaba. So what I do is we help people to understand this in here there's no industry player is never alone. We don't really see a monopoly here. And the second is people are always figuring out new opportunity, even under the shadow of the giants. And that's what the government can go around and actually starting to coming down with this very harsh treatment of the behave monopolies, or not monopolies, but just giant corporations. Without worrying about this interruption of the service to the user or the impact on the economies.
David, that's absolutely interesting, and in fact, you're right. Most of the times, what the media does in a general sense is there is like a symbolic representation of what somebody means in terms of an industry, and then we forget the ecosystem that actually travels within this universe, right? And you started talking about e-commerce, and I'm very interested. If one of the demands that you have within your research is to understand better these e-commerce players, and if yes, if it's niched or if it's broad in this general sense.
Yeah, David. David, sorry. Just 1 minute before you answer, Camila. Let me put in our conversation. He's right here, right now. So welcome in. Good night. If you want to say a few words to our audience, and then we come back to David.
How are you? Good morning for you. Good morning, Camila. Sorry, everyone. I'm a little bit late, but I'm joining. I couldn't miss this opportunity to be with David. Actually, we've been together a few times in Shenzhen when I had the opportunity to get to know David's work, and it's incredible. because I think it's basically the essence of innovation in Shenzhen. It's just in the middle of a lot of things happening, and Shenzhen somehow incorporates or makes it tangible all the innovation that's happening in China. So when I went to Shenzhen and I met David personally, and David has been in Brazil as well, I think twice, and we started to connect, and since then was great opportunity to keep learning with David and cooperating. So David, again, thank you, and sorry to interrupt you. So please, Leal, keep the conversation and start listening first.
No problem. Camila, if you want to do the question again, please feel free.
Sure, David, the question was because David started talking about like how in a general sense we know one of the big players and maybe a face that represents one of the big players of the e-commerce ecosystem in China. And my doubt to him was when clients approach you and when you do your researches, I'd like to know that within this e-commerce ecosystem, if people are more interested about knowing about more niched or a transversal, a broad type of understanding of how to enter the e-commerce, or what types of opportunities exist today in the e-commerce ecosystem in China.
Well, so I think coming in looking at China is the e-commerce opportunity. So we can look at it in a different perspective. Coming in, looking at this as a platform, looking at the opportunity to be a platform in China. Interestingly, it still exists. The scale of the Chinese e-commerce is enormous. It's very interesting. Here's one thing very interesting. I was reading a New York Times article, and in the beginning of the article, it says Amazon, the biggest e-commerce company outside of China. Right now, we actually have to qualify, if you want to talk about Amazon to be the biggest e-commerce company, you have to qualify it as outside of China. Because if you put Amazon in the Chinese context, it probably ranked number 3 or number 4. Not in terms of the market valuation, which is just paper wealth. But in terms of the transactions on the platform. So of course, number 1 in China, Alibaba, people probably heard of. But the number 2, today the number 2, JD, probably not as good as famous. But now we also have a third one, Pinduoduo. Interestingly, Pinduoduo is only 5 years old. 5 years ago, this company got started. Today, this company is the biggest e-commerce company in China in terms of numbers of users. It has over 1 billion users. And second, very interestingly, is if you live in Shanghai, if you live in Beijing, if you live in what's called the first tier city of China, you probably would never heard of this company. Most, I think, Camila and I live here. We probably had very few friends who use Pinduoduo, but Pinduoduo is the biggest e-commerce company here by number, because they focus on rural area. They focus on the 3rd, 4th, 5th tier cities, which created the entirely different business models. So the platform is still evolving. So TikTok or Douyin in China has also announced their e-commerce. They are now a major player in e-commerce as well. Kuaishou, which is the competitor to TikTok in China, also has an e-commerce strategy. So platform still evolving. We don't have. When people ask me about what do you think of the crackdown of Taobao, I was like, great. If Taobao here in China, if Taobao gets shut down tonight, we will still wake up tomorrow. We have we have another 10 platforms we can shop on, and typically from the same vendors. So that's one part of the looking at e-commerce. As a platform opportunity, it's still evolving. There's opportunity there. Then on the other side, it's also as a seller, we do research on Taobao village, small rural village who industrialize themselves, with e-commerce. So that's this village in Suzhou, in Jiangsu. I goes to every year. This is the village of 50,000 people. They started their e-commerce business in about 13 years ago. Today, the village has an e-commerce revenue close to $2 billion a year. And this is a small, in the middle of nowhere village, selling furniture. Well, this is the kind of things happening here. And
David,
yeah.
Can I interrupt you 1 second to make a question about this village? This village, when it started, were you part of the research when it started? And another question is, did the village start by itself before Taobao, or was Taobao the great a sponsor in a sense of the digitalization of this village for e-commerce?
It's not. So the origin of the genesis of the village e-commerce is these 3 young kids who, coming out of the village, they went and they worked in Nanjing, which is the nearest big city. They worked there for 2 years. They get a taste of the city life, and they discover IKEA, this very easy flat pack furniture. And so they bought a couple of things from IKEA when they go back to the village for the New Year's holiday. They talk to the carpenters, and they're starting to make this kind of furniture. And at that time, this is 2005, so 16 years ago, they starting to look at, they do this, and they leverage e-commerce. So 2005, that was Taobao, there was each, there was Amazon, but each and Amazon doesn't open to third party, so only Taobao. So the business started in 2007, and then they've been growing fast since then. They were discovered by Ali Research in 2010, when they're starting to do this big data visualization. And they look at this very high activity e-commerce hotspot in the village, in the middle of nowhere. So if you can picture this, they look at this map of China, and that's a very bright spot in the middle of nowhere and just shining. And so they were curious. They went down there. They see this village starting to have a lot of the e-commerce shop. They are making furniture in their backyard. And I started to go to the village at a conference where I met the head of the RD research, and he was talking about this village. And we shared the panel. And as soon as we finished the panel, I was like, make me an introduction. I'm going there. So the panel was in Beijing, and I was there the next days. So my first trip there was 2016. This is people are still making furniture in their backyard. People are still making furniture. They still don't have an industrial zone. So the production is kind of illegal. It's in China. That's always gray area. The production is in the backyard. The e-commerce that years they just break about $300 million a year. The next year I went, they showed me this new industrial zone They have been building, and every year you go there, it's a different village. Every year they double their sales on Taobao, and every year the e-commerce just get better. The city gets better. The last time I was there was 2019. This time they're really going old. They redo the entire village, new housing, new infrastructures. They even built a new container port. Most of the lumbers they use are from Siberia, from Russia. So they built a container port. So now they can load up the lumbers in Siberia, coming down all the way down through the Yangtze River, going straight into this village in the middle of nowhere, and they have a container port to unload them. And this is what they do when they reach $1 billion in sales. So we are looking at this Taobao village phenomena as rethinking about how e-commerce, how even the digital technology is impacting the productions. So that's the production in the backyard. But right now, if you go to the village, the production model of the village is very interesting. I think these days we talk about augmented reality, virtual reality. We talk about this. People will be wearing the VR, the AR glass, looking at the things, have the furniture pop up in their house, and show them how the furniture will look like, and that's how people will be shopping in the future. I think we have been talking about this for 30 years since that appeared on the science fiction novel. Recently, the NVIDIA CEO has done this keynote with the virtual cell in there for 17 seconds. But as far as we can see in the public media, this is still a very PR stunt, marketing movie stuff. But the real production in the village today is they don't make furniture. They are in e-commerce, so they have a photo of the furniture, but they don't actually make the furniture and put it in the living room and photo it. They render the living room, they render the whole products, and everything show up on their webpage is a photorealistic rendering. Today they are not that different from real pictures. So they get to the point is their design team can come up with 100, 200 models of new furniture, put it all out there on sale without making those 200 prototypes, and everything is done in virtually. And this is the thing we have been talking about in technology, but this is a reality of life and reality of design with this company. The people are very savvy in terms of e-commerce. The village of 50,000 people, now they have 29,000 e-commerce shops. So every two people on average, every two people in the village has an e-commerce shop.
David, but in that model, so they don't actually produce those furnitures. They're able to make renders and simulations of those furnitures. They put it online to sell. On the moment that it's sold, then they produce the furniture. Is that how it works?
Yeah, they pretty much do that. Another thing amazing about they render, they build it just in time. So whoever make the first sale is also the first time a lot of this shop will be producing the furniture. So they have a very just-in-time production ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And the third is the village has no tradition of making furniture. Before e-commerce, before making this flat pack furniture, the place is just a sleepy farming village. They don't have tradition. They don't have craftsman's tradition in the village. So that has an implication. So they are very quick to adopt anything can help them to automate. Any automation they can afford, they deploy because no one in the village has experience. And the second is when industrialization happen in the village like this, they are very fast running up to the issue of shortage of laborers. I mean, if you are young people from a rural village, if you want to leave your village to find work, you don't go to another village. You try to go to a big city. It's not just for the pay, it's actually for the life experience. Otherwise, you just stay in your village and farm. You don't really try to move too far to another village to work. So they adopt automations, whether that be a lot of CNC machine. Anything can be automated, has been automated in the village. And anyone can be hired, has been hired in the village. You go to the village, you see the wanted ad. We want factory workers and the qualification is as long as you are younger than 60s, you are hired. The pay is amazing. They get paid about 7,000 RMB a month, which is equivalent of the same job in the factories in Shenzhen, in Shanghai. And the best part is they don't pay rent. They basically have a little scooter. They live there. They have a breakfast in their house, and they ride the bicycle for 10 minutes to go into the factories. So that actually shows the Taobao village actually shows a very different style of the industrialization. It's technology driven, whether that be driven by e-commerce, by automation, by logistics, but it also has this very they also empower this very country lifestyle. So not only everyone in the village now is part of this e-commerce ecosystem, but the model of village has also been replicated. So in 2010, when Ali Research did the first Taobao village survey, they discovered there are 39 Taobao village. Today, across China, there are about 67,000 Taobao village, specialized in everything. Furniture, bicycles, sleeping bag, glasses, anything you can think of that's particularly a Taobao village for it. And they're very similar in style. They have a cluster, everybody participate. And the other thing about this whole entrepreneur things, the best way to encourage entrepreneurship is not about making them reading the story of Jack Ma. It doesn't matter. It's having an environment where they see their cousin who's doing it, where people see their friend, their elementary school classmate is making it with e-commerce. People learn, and so every time going to the village is very fun. It's very interesting. People don't use big words to describe technology. People use very common everyday word. You go there. The shop owner has a third grade elementary school education, but she'll be talking about how they make furniture in terms of we have this idea of design. We hire we use the internet. We hire a designer who lives in Shanghai, who lives in Shenzhen, who lives in somewhere. They send over the design. We go through the rendering. We put it on. People buy them. We sell them. We have a production in the back end. And when they're production in the back end involving all this CNC machine automation, pretty much practical robotics. But they would describe the whole thing. Like you go to a village and talking to a farmer, talking about the production of their their rights. And they just treat this very, I mean, if we describe it in another way, this is a very high-tech style life. But they are able to describe this in such a language. You would think they were just talking about, oh, this is how we raise chicken in the village.
Yeah. David, let me just ask you. You mentioned the number. Each Taobao village, they have a certain number of e-commerce companies operating, but they are all independent, right? They're not affiliated to each other. But when you mention the village, apparently, I have the feeling that there's one organization of the village that, despite the companies, they're all independent. Someone maybe is running this village or organizing the companies so they can use the resources. You refer to the use of AR and VR and with the furniture. So this is not only one company, right? This is all of them. They're doing the same thing.
Yeah. So Saji, again, village of 50,000 people. They have 29,000 e-commerce shop. Well, and I was joking. At some point, they have more e-commerce shop than they have people there. They are very loosely organized. Well, but it's a Chinese village. So as you would guess, everybody is related to everybody else. And that also very much shows the pragmatism of the Chinese entrepreneur. So a lot of people get their start because when they came out of high school, their cousin is doing e-commerce. They need some people, so they go work for their cousin, and then they go work for their cousin, and once they work for their cousin for 6 months, they figure out the whole thing, and then so they save up some money. They start in their own shop, competing directly with their cousin. That happened a lot. That actually how most of this company happen. But again, even though they are setting up shop, competing their cousin, they actually in the beginning they might not have factories, so they actually buy stuff from their cousins' factories. So this is the kind of very pragmatic relationship we don't typically see with entrepreneur in other place. If it happened in other place, if one of your employee, whether or not that's your cousin, leave your company and starting a company competing with you, see you in court. You are non-compete. And let alone your factory is actually supporting his new shop. But that's what happened when you have a very cooperative ecosystem. And as far as how that rendering, how that whole things come is in the ecosystem of that scale, people starting to specialize. So there's always need for photo. The company specialize in making photo of the furniture, and so of course in the beginning when the technology is not quite there, they still have to make huge. They still have to set up photo studio, taking picture of real furniture. But as we get more computation power, as the rendering gets better, as the Hollywood level rendering becoming doable in the PC, they're starting to employ the rendering into their pipeline, and they're starting to integrate. And this is also another ideas about this innovation happen in adjacent nodes, what's called the adjacent possibility. what's possible today. People will push it a little bit more. The technology application doesn't come in as a leap. There's no quantum leap in technology. We didn't go from a feature phone to a smartphone we have today overnight. Actually, we are celebrating the 13th years of iPhone. It took 13 years to go from the really expensive, overpriced, do nothing iPhone 1 to this do everything iPhone 13. So the kind of thing we see in China is really putting this kind of innovation ecosystem, very technology driven, but also apply to common people. They don't need to have a qualification of top university graduate. They don't need to have a they don't need to have an elevator pitch ready. It's not about getting to work with the VC. It's about learning from your cousin, your friends, your classmates, and be able to bootstrap from there.
Yeah, David, I would like to hear from you when we connect all the power of e-commerce that you mentioned, adding to the city that you're living, Shenzhen, the power of production, especially innovative, high-tech hardware. And then I think that's really where things start to get into a total new level, right? Because it's not only about selling products from the village anymore. It's also about selling high-tech products. And even when we add the approach of or the angle of cross-border e-commerce, then it's you don't have limit of access to the products that are producing in China, especially in Shenzhen, right?
Yeah. So another big one is Shenzhen was a village. It was a fishing village 30 years ago, and see where we are today. But yeah, I think cross-border e-commerce is representing huge opportunity today. So if you shop on Amazon, one thing you should know is the less than 50% of the merchandise on Amazon are actually directly from Amazon. Most of them are now going through a third party. This is the third party a company in Shenzhen would sign up for a third party account on Amazon, and they sell through that. When you search a battery bank on Amazon, when you search a charge head, when you search a earphone on Amazon, most likely you are not going to directly the Amazon store. You are going to a third-party store. The Amazon third party has only been opened up for actually only 6-7 years, but this has created a huge third-party ecosystem. It's right now probably $1 trillion scale. And interestingly, a lot of this is concentrated in China. 70% of the Amazon third parties are Chinese-based, and probably half of this 70% is located in Shenzhen, who sells accessory to mobile phone, charger, headphone, battery bank, everything you use to connect it to your mobile phone. They're all coming out from the third party. It's under a tremendous growth, and it's also under the new type of the restructuring. You can go on Amazon, you can go on Google and starting to read the news about Amazon cracking down on the Chinese seller. It's opened up another layer of opportunity, and as e-commerce starting to push into more area. That they are going to be they are having a huge opportunity here. But this is one part of China e-commerce opportunity rarely talk about outside of China, but it's huge. And if you go to Shenzhen today, if you go to the Huaqiangbei market, there are Amazon cars everywhere. Everybody just like in a small village we talk about. You look at your cousin and that he's making money, making furniture on Taobao. And in Shenzhen, the same. Your friend, your classmate, they are making money on this cross-border e-commerce. So everybody signed up, taking class. And actually, it's very interesting is for the past years, the hardest class is not Amazon. The hardest class is TikTok. How to use TikTok, how to use TikTok for e-commerce. And I think that big part of opportunity is going to have it's going to presenting a huge opportunity for the global entrepreneur. E-commerce is huge. E-commerce is everywhere. But the nuanced understanding of how e-commerce actually works it's going to present a huge opportunity for entrepreneur, especially in the next 5 years. We are moving to a next stage of e-commerce. E-commerce is no longer a static web page. It's going to be driven more by live streaming, by show video. And for international market, if you look at Amazon product description from the third party, it's terrible. You can actually see there are some kids in Shenzhen who wrote the whole product description in Chinese, run it through the Google Translate, and just post it. And typically people say, "Oh, how terrible they are doing this." But I was like, "Yeah, but when you think about this, the guy doesn't barely know any English. Is doing entire product description in Chinese, running that through Google Translate. Is making $1 million a year. And you are not excited about this. And in the future, this is going to get harder because once we're starting to get on TikTok, once we're starting to get on all the live streaming platform, the demand for native language, the demand for localized content is going to be even higher. And that's a bar we cannot cross yet, even with technology. And it's opened up huge opportunity for local merchants to starting to think about how do I bootstrap, how do I have my own Taobao village where I have a group of people who's active on e-commerce. How do they tap into the ecosystem of Shenzhen? You can make your own charger. You can make your own battery bank. You can make your own headphone and launching your own business. And that's a huge opportunity, which I would really like to see a lot more of the entrepreneur everywhere to take on, not just entrepreneur here in Shenzhen or in China. And that's where this global cooperation can start.
Great. David, let me ask you about open innovation. When we think about open innovation here in the West, we think about traditional companies opening their doors and their minds to creating an environment when they can work with this high tech or this innovative ecosystem and searching for solutions to their problems. Connecting with these new players, let's say like this. How does it work in China with traditional companies that try to connect with this whole innovative and increasing ecosystem? And now I'm talking about a lot of different sectors, not only e-commerce or retail, but other industries. How do the big companies, not the big techs, but the big companies, traditional companies, work or try to work with this new ecosystem?
David, let me just ask a question first, maybe. Is the concept of open innovation in China the same as we understand in the West?
So it's very different. Actually, the ideas of this. So right now, when we talk about open innovation, this term is being used very much by large company, which is very vertically integrated. They do everything, and typically they are very dominated in one industry, in the industry or in the vertical sectors. And when they talk about innovation, it's always like, yeah, we have this whole big chunk of business. We kind of don't know what next could be. So they open up a small, they open up a little bit, and they invited all this company to come in and participate in this innovation pitch events. But most of the typically it turns out to be the open innovation side is more of a PR and HR. So they basically, well, they have an open innovation contest, and then they just hire all the winning team. And that's how the HR side work, and the PR side is we are open innovation. In China, the company, the big company is forming the foundation of this open ecosystem. So let's take mobile phone as example. So there's a big company called MediaTek, which providing the chips for the mobile phone. So MediaTek, on top of MediaTek, we have Solution House, who make the chip into all different forms of circuit board. And on top of that, we have factories who makes case to fit into those circuit board into a mobile phone. And on top of that, we have the whole white label company who take the finished phone, put on their logo, define their color, and they go and they discover different market. Someone might discover the market for this in Hanoi, in Vietnam. Some people might go and discover marketing opportunity in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, in third-tier city China, in the rural village. And that's how the entire open innovation stack works. So at the bottom, large company, actually today, MTK has surpassed Qualcomm to become the biggest chip supply company. But they don't do open innovation for fun. They survive by open innovation. They are there as a large company. They are there to service everyone. All the way, their reach is all the way down to a kid who's selling a mobile phone, all the way out there in Africa. And that's what open innovation means here. Open innovation is a complex web of the industrial ecosystem. Company in here either open and cooperative or they die. There's actually no vertical. There are actually very few vertical dominating player in China. Even when people talk about Huawei, people think about this giant company which is dominating Chinese tech sectors. So I got a very interesting question. People ask me, how come the Chinese government is not going after Huawei for monopoly? But if you actually look at Huawei by number, it's only 16% of the mobile phone globally. It's less than 25% of the mobile phone in China. On the back end, it's competing with ZTE, with Nokia, with Ericsson. Huawei is at most 30-35% of the global telecom backend market. It's huge, but not that huge. It's not monopoly. The openness is the open innovation is what builds in China as the competition landscape. It's not an afterthought. It's not a PR. It's how they survive. It's how they flourish.
Great. I think it's there's a fundamental difference from the way we do here in the West and of course how companies must do in China. So it's very interesting. Let's talk about a little bit more about Shenzhen. Explain a little bit more how this fisher village in 30 years ago turned into a super city and a reference about technology and innovation in China and of course around the world. But what is so special about Shenzhen to be able to be in this position nowadays?
So Shenzhen celebrated its 40th birthday last year. So it's in 1980s. Chinese government wanted to experiment with capitalism, but they didn't want to do it in any of the real Chinese city. They didn't want to risk it and experimenting this in Guangzhou or Shanghai or Beijing. So they come down to the south of China, cross border from Hong Kong. It's actually a collection of 15 fishing village with about a population of 150,000 to 200,000. And they say, okay, well, this is Shenzhen, and we are going to experiment with the special economic zone. But they are so worried about the spillover effect of if the experiment go wrong. So they actually built a physical wall around Shenzhen. So picture this: the East-West Berlin kind of huge wall of they built back then in Berlin, surrounding Berlin. We used to have a wall surrounding Shenzhen, and actually the last piece of the wall gets taken down only 2 years ago. It's interesting, and then people starting to come in and experimenting with the capitalism. Foreigner companies starting to come in and build manufacturers, and so it started from the area experiment got started, and very soon there are more and more electronic makers comes in to set it up in Shenzhen for electronic productions, mostly from Taiwan, Singapore, Korea, the four little dragon of Asia. But so in the first 20 years, the development of Shenzhen is not that much different from the development of the four dragons. What's starting to change is once the manufacturer, the productions, the people gets to critical mass, and when the opportunity comes, the first big opportunity come for Shenzhen in terms of the local innovation and local opportunity is the DVD players. This is the late 90s. For those of us old enough to remember DVD, the DVD player was very expensive, $1,000 in the late 90s, and the DVD was very fragile. A little bit of scratch. Back then the $40-50 DVD disc was very fragile. A little bit of a scratch on it, it won't play in your $1,000 expensive DVD player. But in the late 90s, China starting to become developed and become wealthy. People want entertainment, and of course, the form of carrying entertainment was DVD, and all the DVD were pirated, and most of them are very terrible in quality. But since by then the huge production of DVD are already in Shenzhen, there are engineers who understand how to do this. There are designers, there are mechanical engineers who understand how to do this. So people starting to come together and research, develop this DVD, the DVD player which reads any DVD. Doesn't matter how bad it is, with hardware, software, they recover. And they are able to make this for $100 and instant hits everywhere. This is we're reducing the entertainment for a DVD from $1,000 a machine and $50 $1,000 a machine and $50 a disc to $100 a machine and 50 cents a disc. It's affordable. It goes everywhere. And this is the first accumulation and the first time this open innovation is making a huge impact. And I think this teach the Shenzhen ecosystem three things. First of all, when we work together, we can break a lot of technical restriction and technical problem very fast. Second of all, that's a huge niche market, not the traditional what we think as the consumer market. The cheap DVD goes to rural area first. They goes to third, fourth tier city first. They goes to developing countries. This DVD player in the late 90s, it's not just when they become popular, they are not just popular in China. They are popular in South America, Southeast Asia. Anywhere people want cheap entertainment, they are there. So that's also informing Shenzhen about this. And the third is the interesting company will merge out of this chaos. So they're starting to a company very specialized in making the DVD stabilizer, making the DVD reader head, everything. And when you are big enough, everybody works with you. So they are getting their chip supply from large companies like Texas Instruments, ST Microelectron. So that's how Shenzhen got this really accumulating the first local wealth in terms of deriving not from labors, but deriving from manufacturing innovations and deriving from having their own brand going out there. So, and when we comes into 2000, the GSM is everywhere. So the same ecosystem in Shenzhen moving to work on mobile phone. In the early 2000s, the uncontracted Nokia phone was $800. It's too expensive for majority of the world. They are probably only available to less than 5% of the 10% of the world populations. But when the Shenzhen ecosystem moved into this, they're starting to making mobile phone for $100, $50, $70, $50. And this opened up the entire new consumer base. And again, the same effect kicks in. The mobile phone goes everywhere. So Shenzhen really builds on these ideas of open innovation. So the things led me to do a lot of research in Shenzhen is in 2010. We started a small think tank looking at innovation in China, and we are very closely associated with the maker movement. So we talk about open source software, open source hardware, especially open source hardware. So it was interesting. I gave a lot of talk about maker movement, and everywhere I go, I talk about open source hardware. And people ask the question if you open source and share every intellectual property of your hardware, how do you make money? I gave my first talk in Shenzhen in 2011, and when I talk about open source hardware, the sharing of all this intellectual property. And I was expecting the question of about, if you open up, how do you make money? But the question I got in Shenzhen is so what's new about this? This is how we do business around here for 20 years. So what's new about this whole open sharing, open maker ideas? And that one question piqued our interest in Shenzhen. And even to today, this kind of open innovation of Shenzhen continue to impacting not just in China, but it spillovers. It's been spread across through the Belt and Road outreach. So I was in Ethiopia in late 2019. Today, 60% of the mobile phone used in Ethiopia have been produced in Ethiopia. 40% of the mobile phone on the Ethiopian market are local Ethiopian brands. Overall, Ethiopia is actually also a mobile phone exporting country. And this is not really fitting that narrative in terms of how we think about technology being developed, but it's actually happening. And driving on this, there are very indigenous, localized innovation to make mobile phone works better in the spatial environment. So this is the thickness of mobile phone. And when you go to Africa today, you can find mobile phone twice as thick, with a battery life goes up for 2 weeks. That's a solution. Otherwise, it's like most of us carrying the battery bank and the cable always attached to our mobile phone. So based on this kind of open innovation model, this is how Shenzhen turned from a fishing village to a huge innovation hub. And in between, and the third leg of this is with this kind of huge cooperative ecosystem, third party, there are a lot of companies starting to specialize because they are supplying to so many customers. They have such a volume. They can afford to invest into a deep research and development. They don't have to come out and raise money. They don't have to, because they survive by they flourish by being part of this ecosystem. Like keep telling people is the in Shenzhen startup doesn't have to figure it out. What we always say, we want 10x improvement of things for startup. We want 100x improvement. In Shenzhen, startup only has to do 1% improvement because they are tapping into part of this $1 trillion ecosystem of electronics, mobile phone. 1% improvement for $1 trillion is $1 billion. And so if you figure out a 1% improvement in this industry, you are $1 billion business. Even if you figure out 0.1% improvement, you are $100 million business. And that's where the startup in Shenzhen is talking in a very different term. Who's going to risk a lot of their opportunity on a 10 years investment into a 5x when they can do 1% and be $1 billion business? And we're not just talking about one company doing the 1% improvement. We're talking about 1,000 companies trying to 5,000 companies trying to figuring out 1% improvement constantly. And over time, 1% looks short, but when you can do 1% in a month, it looks exponential when you plot that innovation speed over time. And that's why Shenzhen is interesting. It's chaotic. It's a big party. It's everybody's invited.
David, let me ask you. When I remember when we first met, I have the impression that maybe the Chinese open innovation model should have another name, because sometimes maybe it's not referring to the same thing. Because it's like when we talk about open innovation, I'm not specialist. I'm just maybe a more curious person because it's not something that I work. But in the Western model, it's more about companies or focusing companies that are open to innovation that's happening in other places. Either it's on the academy or by consumers or any third party. Okay, so when we talk open innovation, is based on the company itself and how it relates to the ecosystem. But when you talk about this, and it's always about, in China, it's always about the chain or the ecosystem is the basis, not about the company itself. The company is really part of a bigger ecosystem. So and actually it's even the Chinese mindset, right? We always talking about groups, talking about community, and the open innovations already. There's a different angle. So sometimes I have the feeling that maybe the open innovation in China should have a different name, but still, regardless of this, because it's a different angle when you start to discuss the open innovation. I don't know if I made myself clear or not, because what the starting point is different. Maybe this is the way that I want to choose to say.
Actually, the starting point is more or less the same in every innovation ecosystem. So when I do these talks about Shenzhen, about this very cooperative ecosystem, sometimes people would tell me like, yeah, but this is a Chinese thing. This is only Chinese does this. But this actually happened throughout the history. But because in a lot of time this has happened so long ago, people forgot how they got started. If you look at, since we are talking electronics, let's stick with the development of the ICT sectors. Go back to the origin of the Silicon Valley, where they started Fairchild. They started the semiconductors. That's a group of 7 people, what's called Treacherous 7, which means the 7 people who are originally from Fairchild. They leave the Fairchild, and they started the company which started the foundation of the Silicon Valley today. They are just like the cousin who learned from their cousin and leave and starting their own company. There was no litigation. They just gone. And these are the company who started. These are people who started Intel, who started AMD, who started all this company. We really making the name for Silicon Valley. And there are a lot of good documentaries and a lot of memoir for people from that era. It's like, yeah, we just having our engineer moving around all this company. The idea gets flow freely. The idea gets everybody copy everybody else. We are not suing each other. We just work together to advance the whole field as a whole. And that's how Silicon Valley got its name. It is as chaotic in the beginning as as Shenzhen 40 years ago, in the 60s, in the 70s. Silicon Valley is, well, there wasn't even a Silicon Valley. It's a farm field of origin. It's a farmland. It got turned into Silicon Valley, driving exactly the same kind of open innovation. What we see as the narrative of open innovation and this big corporate dominant war and this very godlike character is after they consolidate the industry. then they're starting to build up this mythology of Silicon Valley, not in terms of the treacherous seven who just live and work together to create industry, but they are trying to make God out of these 7 people. And they are starting to creating the same thing is if you are not special, you are not deserved to be part of this. And that's the later on how history writes story. So I think one thing to really think about is the open innovation is how we innovate in the beginning, how we set up the system starting. It's not really something special in China just because it happened in China in a very different time frame. And when we starting to, a lot of time people forgot how most of the industry got started. So yeah, for me, is the narrative we should take back this open innovation from the large corporation. And in China, we use the term 山寨 to specify this in terms of the more grassroots, more bottom up. But I try not to use 山寨. I try still reclaiming the open innovation because that's actually by default how we start in industry, how innovation happen. There's nothing special about. There's nothing special about it in China. That's how most of the industry got started.
Great. So, David, more than 1 hour talk, amazing. I'd like to thank you so much for being with us. If you want to leave a final message for our audience, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to be here, and it's lovely to have the opportunity to carry on this conversation. And yeah, if anyone have more questions on how things happen here, feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you. Everybody can connect with David through LinkedIn. So there's his profile there. So if you want to talk more about open innovation in China, feel free to connect directly with David through LinkedIn. It's going to be a great way to continue this talk. So thank you once again. I'm going to switch to Portuguese for us to end the live session, okay? Great. Então, pessoal, pra gente, thank you very much. Pra gente, saiu fora. Pra gente encerrar aqui, então, nossa Hora da China de hoje, vou passar aqui a bola para Camila e Yin darem suas considerações finais aí para todo mundo. Vamos com você, Yin. Camila, quem vai primeiro?
Eu.
Vai, Camila.
Eu acho bastante interessante, gente. É muito interessante, né? A cabeça de cada entrevistado que a gente tem, como funciona e opera de uma forma diferente, né? E você vê a veia de pesquisa que tem o David, né? Você ter uma perspectiva de construção desde a origem que explica ou embasa o status quo, né, o momento que a gente está, assim, eu acho isso muito interessante sobre a cabeça de pessoas, assim, eu acho fantástico. Só um parênteses. E adoraria também aprofundar mais, eu acho que a gente tem algumas vertentes para entender de Open Innovation, eu acho que a gente tem vertentes de inovação para entender e depois de inovação aberta para entender, porque quando a gente entende que já inovação per se já está craftada de uma forma diferente do que, né, a gente contempla no Brasil e aqui, é claro que inovação aberta vai ter outra perspectiva também, né? Então, eu acho que isso é muito interessante da gente entender, assim, a raiz cultural, né, de como isso acontece, tece para o que a gente vê hoje, inclusive no mercado, né? Não só em pesquisas, mas no mercado. Então, acho que é muito interessante a gente entender. E, enfim, vamos pensar até em como a gente pode fomentar um pouquinho mais essa discussão que é maravilhosa. Eu acho incrível. Até porque, só uma perspectiva, Europa, Estados Unidos e Ásia, né, só em grandes blocos em si, já tem perspectivas diferentes de inovação. E inovação aberta também. Então, vamos aprofundar isso em próximos A Horas da China.
Sem dúvida, sem dúvida. Fala aí.
Só queria trazer ou reforçar aquela última palavra, a expressão que o David usou, Shanghai. Se alguém tiver interesse, acho que vale a pena muito pesquisar isso, porque ela tem toda a origem nessa questão da fabricação dos DVDs, a origem de Shenzhen, tem mistura com a realidade do mercado, do crescimento econômico, então é uma mistura assim, explosiva. E que é a base da inovação em Shenzhen, principalmente na parte de hardware. Então, acho que vale a pena, quem tiver mais interesse, pesquisar. Shanghai é Shanzhai, ok? E assim, Shanghai, a tradução literal, eu acho que muitas vezes, talvez para alguém mais acadêmico ou que está estruturando as coisas como deve, tem uma visão um pouco específica com isso, mas a tradução literal é quase como se fosse o Robin Hood. É tirar dos ricos para levar para os pobres, tirar de onde tem mais e levar para onde tem menos. E, no final das contas, é a disseminação ou a pulverização dos recursos e dos conhecimentos. E se a gente está falando de conhecimento, e aí está muito ligado a Open Innovation, todo esse conceito. Então, acho que vale a pena. Até eu estava lembrando aquele estúdio, o IDO, eles chamam Shanzhai de grassroots innovation. Então, é a inovação raiz, assim, quase raiz de Nutella. Então, é a inovação no campo, assim, na frente, no campo de batalha, no dia a dia, na indústria, muito ralando de fato e transformando as coisas. Não é uma inovação super sofisticada. Então, isso é bem interessante a gente dar destaque a isso. Legal? Era essa parte que eu queria... Oi, fala, Camila.
Inovação de guerrilha, a gente pode dizer ou não?
Eu ia chamar de ground innovation. Tipo,
mas em português, em português. Pensemos.
Vamos pensar, na semana que vem.
A gente coloca nos comentários.
Camila, eu gosto dessa tradução do grassroots para raiz, porque, de fato, é mais, vamos dizer assim, de certa forma, ele é um pouco mais tosco, não tem sofisticação de grandes corporações. Como ele falou, você não precisa ter uma mega formação, você tem os recursos à sua disposição, o mercado trabalhando junto, de uma forma quase integrada, por isso que eu sempre falo muito assim, a sensação que eu tenho é que quando ele narra toda a questão de Shenzhen, são os blocos que estão colocados e trabalhando junto, por isso que eu não consigo enxergar a inovação aberta saindo de uma empresa para o resto. Quando a gente fala do Ocidente, é uma forma geral isso. O personagem é a empresa. Quando a gente fala em inovação aberta, do ponto de vista, quando ele narra de Shenzhen, sempre está falando de todo mundo. Dificilmente ele fala de uma empresa isoladamente. Então, ele fala da grande empresa que faz o chip, dos estúdios, da empresa que produz, disso. É sempre um bloco. E aí sempre nos remete ao mindset de comunidade, ecossistema, disso tudo. Então, nada é isolado nesse modelo. Mas com uma grande vantagem que ele depois acabou narrando no final, que é tudo caótico, né? Então, as coisas estão organizadas, e aí quem tiver a oportunidade de um dia visitar Shenzhen, naqueles prédios de componentes, vai falar, esse daqui é uma zona e como que os caras conseguem movimentar tudo isso. Mas, enfim, acho que aí vale realmente a gente discutir mais sobre um modelo de inovação aberta de Shenzhen ou da China de uma forma geral.
Boa, maravilha. Muito bem, pessoal. Eu só vou responder aqui a Gabriela, ela perguntou, cadê a professora Hsieh, que não apareceu hoje? Pois é, hoje não tivemos, excepcionalmente, a professora Hsieh estava com algumas demandas lá da Pula Muralha muito grandes e acabou não conseguindo aqui trazer o vídeo essa semana, mas foi só hoje, tá, pessoal? Depois ela volta com mais dicas aí de mandarim, não se preocupem. Certo, pessoal? Bom, Hora da China, para quem já acompanha, toda terça-feira, 21 horas. A gente não sabe exatamente se a gente não decidiu aqui, na verdade, bastidor, se na semana que vem vai ter, porque é feriado. Aqui no Brasil é feriado. Então, acompanhem as redes da StartSe para descobrir se teremos ou não Hora da China na semana que vem, mas se não, toda semana de fé aqui, estamos aqui. E uma saudação especial ao Horst.
Leal, eu voto a Camila e o Vini fazendo direto da China.
Boa.
Vai que não vai ser feriado.
Pode ser. Um abraço aqui para o Horst, que fazia tempos que não aparecia aqui na Hora da China e hoje voltou ativo aqui no chat. Grande abraço para o Horst e para todos vocês aí, pessoal, que acompanharam com a gente. Foi, mais uma vez, ótimo estar com vocês. Camila, muito bom dia e muito boa noite. Todos, até a próxima semana ou na outra, mas toda terça-feira, 21 horas aqui na Hora da China. Valeu, pessoal. Grande abraço. Tchau, tchau.
Bom dia, Camila. Tchau, tchau.